welcome back to Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists examine gaming through a feminist lens. You'll notice today there's just two of us, that's me, Alex, and Matt, and we're going to talk about God of War. We're going to continue our very excited chat about our reaction to God of War Ragnarok. But before we start, if you do want to support us, you can actually subscribe to our shiny new Patreon. At patreon.com/gamingthesystem, all one word. We release a special Patreon-only episode once a month. So if you want that extra, then please do consider subscribing. Thank you. All right, Matt, did you want to kick off today's continued discussion of Ragnarok?
Yes, absolutely. So the theme, what I want to talk about, and I've noticed this all the way through, and one of the most beautiful things to start off with: animals, 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 animals. The
Yes.
animals in God of War Ragnarok are magnificent. They're like an entire. I've never felt so much animal love
Mm.
and so much how important animals are in the life of the characters.
Mhm.
Did you feel that way?
Yeah, reflecting on it now you've mentioned it, I feel like animals and like protecting nature and just generally like being aware of how we are not the only people to inhabit the world we live in. It's kind of pushing that message through the whole game, and they really brought all the animals to life a lot more in this in this game in scary ways as well, like with the combat. um there's an early part of the game where have a sort of boss fight against a bear. And of course, these are going to be spoiler casts, and we later find out that that is actually Atreus in his bear form, which is his most rageful form. And at the time, he couldn't control it. So Kratos very nearly kills his own son while fighting. I think they gave it a name in the boss fight, but I can't remember what it was called.
It's Bjorn.
Um, Bjorn, yes, that's a very Nordic name, which is very cool. But yes, even they make the animals really stand out in terms of how they are, like how they're very wild and ferocious, but also how they are in terms of being a pet, because of course Atreus is an animal lover, and I think that really comes through how he cares for his wolves, and indeed Angrboda has some wolf friends as well. There's all sorts, but it just shows you all different sides of how we can connect to animals as well. They're all gods, but we're humans, and I think it's a very human thing to want to connect with animals, definitely.
Yeah, it's just that I just from the first, and you see Fenrir,
Yeah,
that makes you go, oh, they're
yeah.
not just wolves that pull the sled.
Mm.
They're beautiful little souls.
Yeah. No,
And
they you can tell they've really become part of the sort of family unit while we've been away, which is very cool.
and it feels like it was, they had the three wolves, but I feel like the two, Kratos has his connection to, I think they're called Specky and Svanna,
That's
the
right,
ones
yes.
that pull the sled, um, because they serve a purpose. They pull the sled.
Mm.
But Fenrir was just Atreus's pet wolf. So I think that's another area perhaps where Atreus is sort of finding himself outside of his what his father tells him to do.
Hmm.
So I can't imagine Kratos having a pet just for the sake of having a pet. Just imagine him having one of those cute little sausage dogs, that kind of thing. Um, yeah, so from that very moment, the feeling, because Atreus can connect with animals through, you can sort of read how they're feeling.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, that's at the very start. Was he's got the Specky and Svanna, the lovely wolves, and then Fenrir. So that rips your heart out straight away. Um, Did any other animals off the top of your head make a particular impact on you?
Just trying to think, because there was also various mounts as well, like even that we already talked about Heimdall and some of the creatures you fight. They're quite similar, like the like fire lion and the ice lion, which is really cool. I'm trying to think. I do remember. I want to bring it back. Actually, I had a thought in my head when you were talking about Specky and Spanner. I actually got really emotional right at the end of the game after completing the main story. Um, I was finishing off a little side quest in Midgard where you'd found these gangs of I can't remember what they were, but they were like the sort of humans that had been left behind, and they were hunting the wolves and killing them for like no good reason. And we were kind of clearing them out before the camps. And once you've done that, you realise that Specky and Spanner were still feeling a little bit scared and anxious. And then you find out the reason is because Kratos has been quite um, he's not been very friendly towards them, or as friendly as he could be. And once he realizes that and starts being more warm towards them, they're like they calm down, and when you pet them, you get a lovely trophy at the end. And I was, oh, you get a trophy for petting them. You can be friends now. So good. Just made me really really reflect on how Kratos had changed his the way he viewed them, from being a utility to being friends and companions a little bit more, and kind of in not in memory of Atreus, because obviously he'd started his own adventure by then, but it did sort of feel like he was channeling Atreus's spirit and thinking of how he
Mm,
would react in that situation a
mm,
little bit more,
mm.
which was really nice. It made me quite emotional.
Oh, that's such
Yeah.
a good point. Because otherwise he probably would have been just uncomfortable. Because that's how Kratos gets whenever there's any
Mm.
kind of like emotional stuff. He gets uncomfortable, and it's easy for him to shut off. But in that moment, he must have gone, and heard, what would Atreus say if he was here?
Yeah.
And then he
Yeah.
actually, it's not just saying something or thinking something; it's the
Mm.
action of actually.
And what I liked was that Freya was challenging him to think that way as well, to consider different things might be happening, which is really cool because it shows how their relationship has evolved as well and how they help each other too, which is really nice.
I
And of course,
was.
Freya has a really strong connection to all the animals and nature as well. That's a really, I think, even from when we first meet her, we of course, oh, that's the thing I was going to bring up. The boar, the boar from the first game is an actual human. Well, he's a god. He's a god, and he has the power to transform from a boar back into a man and then back into a boar again if he wants to. So who we shot in the first game is actually Freya's advisor, which I thought was a very interesting callback. Definitely, um, that was a nice little story sprinkled in there, because they that's part of the Vanaheim quests as well, which is very good. Because that's basically a whole game in itself, Vanaheim.
Yeah, madness. I I, what playing through the scene where Atreus goes to visit um,
Charlie?
Freya. No, we'll
Oh,
get to
I'll come
that.
back to it.
We'll
Yeah.
get to that. Freya sat in the Council of the Valkyries, just staring at the fire, sharpening like a
Yeah.
fucking psychopath. In the little tent, the boar is lying there asleep
Is it?
in the
I didn't
tent.
even see that. I didn't even see that. Wow. I'll have to watch that again.
Yeah,
That's
just
a good
resting
spot.
there. Yeah. And what's the name of the boar? Is a really
It's a very,
unusual name.
yes. It's a
Whatever the
very,
boar's name
yeah,
in,
I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah.
I think he's clearly trying to make a move on Sif at
Mm,
the end. They're
which
just
is
sort of
funny as well. Yeah.
flirting over the map.
Yes, that was a nice touch. Definitely.
Since you brought it up, Charlie,
Yeah.
how could Freya forget
I
Charlie? That
know.
was
I felt so
Devastating.
sad for him. I felt so sad for him. I wish we could have spent longer in his little house because we get pulled away by Odin, or at least Atreus wants to go back to see Odin. Um, and we suddenly just have to leave Charlie, and we're like, but who will look after him? And then it's a mystery for much of the rest of the game until let me try and remember who it was. It was right at the end. We found somebody and said,
Yeah, it was the traveller
"Ah,
who saved
yes,
us by jumping off
that
the
was
magic
amazing."
boat.
Also, yeah, that sequence was amazing in the sky on the sky boat. And he just leaps off for Vanaheim, and then you spend like the next 10 hours trying to find him. At least we did. It was quite a long
Yeah,
time. So many side distractions. But yeah, that was amazing. So I'm glad that Charlie now has a friend and companion again, because he must have been very sad and lonely, especially in Ragnarok,
and
um,
Fimbulwinter
in
just freeze.
Fimbulwinter rather. Yeah, yeah, poor Charlie. But at least Atreus was able to check in with him. I was glad. Yeah.
That was yeah. So that's the perfect another just
Mm,
perfect tying up with
mm.
a bow is the traveller going and sitting. Atreus starts a fire in the
Yeah,
house and it warms him up. It's so cute.
it was very cute.
And Freya and Kratos can go and visit him, and they can just go and sit and chill out there.
Yeah,
Oh, that'd be lovely.
yeah. Well, I've just thought of something when you mentioned about how Kratos at the start viewed Specky and Svanna as only being useful in terms of pulling the sled. When you think about Odin and his relationship to animals,
Mm,
he purely just utilizes them for his own ends and twists them and fashions them into tools of his own making, and sometimes quite grotesquely as well. There's an awful lot going on with his ravens that I don't think I fully understood, but
mm.
a lot of not very nice things when you do just finally discover all the ravens, with the raven keeper as well. That's a whole other story. And the main ravens, trying to remember their names. Is it like they rhyme? I think. Um,
I can't remember.
no, but the two big ravens, the ones that basically go and do Odin's bidding a lot of the time and transport him from place to place. Um, did they have their brains basically rewired or removed, or like
No,
their memories taken out? I can't remember what happened.
something horrible.
Something horrible. Yes. So that basically all their souls were, parts of their souls were taken out or something. So they only live to, all they can do is basically serve Odin and nothing else, which is just shows how cruel Odin is as a person.
It just
Well,
struck me that literally everything you just said is exactly what he does to the people
mm,
in his life as
it's
well.
very true.
That just
Yeah.
struck me. He twists them grotesquely to get them to do what he wants.
Mm,
And
yeah.
oh,
Horrible. Yes.
evil. That's fascinating. And one of it's so fascinating watching Odin as Tyr now that you know
Mm,
who he is.
yeah.
And the first big moment that you go, oh, you bastard, you tricky
Mm,
bastard, is when you've just gone through the Temple of Light in Alfheim.
mm,
You're trying to get to Grower's Shrine because, and that's what so interesting. When Atreus sneaks back in, and Tyr and Kratos have been talking, you imagine all the stuff that uh, Odin has just learned
mm,
that he wasn't
mm.
able to
Yeah.
learn from like from like from Boulder or something.
Yeah.
He didn't know that, so learning all about that, and then it was his idea to go to Alfheim to look for Grower's Shrine,
Mm,
and then so that was part 1, and then they go in and they see Ragnarok,
mm.
then they see that uh, actually in Ragnarok only Asgard gets destroyed,
Yeah.
and then I think one of them says, "Oh, what does this mean?" And then and then Odin as Tyr, he just walks forward like entranced, and he
Mm.
just bumps Atreus out of the way, just bumps into his shoulder
Yeah.
as if he doesn't see him. It's just completely, and he goes, "She lied."
Yeah.
So that was Odin going, that
Yeah.
damn, that tricky, ah. And then as he stood there, Kratos and Atreus, because they're arguing about who the
Mm.
champion is,
Yeah.
and Atreus says, "But this is time. We've got something. We know something that Odin doesn't know." And
Mm.
and Tyr is literally standing in the background looking at what they've just
Yeah.
discovered.
Yeah.
You tricky bastard.
Mm. But so much of what you go through in that early part of the game, it's so much more of a the situation just feels so much more in jeopardy knowing that it's Odin, even though you know it's going to go exactly how it goes anyway. But yeah, imagine, gosh, what's going through Odin's mind must be quite a lot of things. Yeah.
He's so sharp. And then another
Mm.
thing later, just that next bit when they're around the dinner table, um, Tyr comes up to Atreus and hands him his food and says, "There you go, fit for a champion."
Yeah.
And then that sparks off Kratos and Atreus having
Yes.
a massive argument.
Yeah, I thought that was a slightly odd comment. Now that you mention it again, I'm like, hmm, should he be stirring the pot like that? But of course he meant to.
And he
Yeah.
says, as Atreus walks off, he says, "Forgive me, Kratos. My words were chosen carelessly." And
Mm.
it just, he can't resist. Just,
No.
this is going to really, they're going to kick themselves later on once I reveal myself.
Yes. No. Thinking also, I've just come back to it's just come back to me about animals. There's quite a lot of animals in Jotunheim when you go and visit Ingerbode for the first time. Uh, One of my favourite parts was spending time with Yala. Is she a yak? I think.
Yes, I think she's a
Yeah.
yak. The
What did you think
beautiful
of that
magic.
whole section?
Oh, it was just, oh,
It was lovely and
to,
relaxing.
to just have a game where, so I'd suspended all, like, this is one of those things where it only happens once in a great
Mm.
while, this kind of thing comes along. And to just be able to sit back and let it just come to you and just wander around on a yak,
Yeah.
not in any particular rush, and trusting that the game knows what it's doing, the game designers know what they're doing, and that they're showing you something wonderful and even more is in store. And just that yak, that lovely
So
yak.
cute.
Oh, and
Mm.
it moves so slowly.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Oh,
cute.
that was
No,
beautiful.
it's nice. It's definitely a downtime part of the game where you just go around collecting fruit for like half an hour. Yeah, I really enjoyed spending time in Jotunheim. It was very cool because you're basically exactly in Atreus' shoes because he has no idea what's going on either.
Mm.
So that was really fun to kind of explore that as well.
And
Definitely.
it's so interesting setting up the future of it.
Mm.
Uh, the oh no, that's for the second half of what I
Yeah,
wanted to
no, we'll
talk
come
about.
back.
So
What
we'll
did
come
you
back to
think
that.
of Engelboda's really fast fox type creature? I'm not sure what it was, but they had a race. Do you remember
Oh yeah,
towards the
yeah.
end? And Atreus turned into his wolf form, and then she was riding her little fox creature. I don't know what it was, but that was quite a strange. I mean, it was very
Very
cool, but yeah,
very light and
yeah.
no, you
It,
can forget all the difficult stuff.
it reminded me of Journey quite a lot. You know, the bit where you slide down the sand for ages. That part. It reminded me of that because you're kind of racing the scarf creatures in that part in Journey. It just reminded me of that for some reason because it was quite joyful, like just leaping off, having a run around.
Yeah, it just felt all the weight of the world was lifted for a little bit,
Mm,
because that
yeah.
was just before that. Atreus was stressing about not being able to control himself,
Yes. Yes.
and Angbode helped him with that.
Yeah.
Um, and she's got her little stable full of soulless animals,
Yeah.
which was
Yeah.
horrendous.
Yeah.
Horrendous.
Oh.
Talking of other pets,
Mm.
um, I really should have looked up all the names of everything before.
No,
But
it's all right.
what's the female dwarf blacksmith?
Linda.
Lunda. Her
Oh,
dog.
her dog. Yeah.
Oh,
So
she
cute.
just sat
Also.
there with that beautiful face.
Yeah. And he's just lying down, just sleeping quite a lot of the time.
Mm.
It's very cute. Very cute.
And the entire side quest going to get his fetch
Yeah.
ball.
Yeah. Yeah. Good tracker. Good tracker. Can smell things from very far away as well, which is good. There are so many different animals. They're not technically animals, but I really loved the tree creatures in Sinju's house, just outside by the
Those little,
by
they're
the
like
gate.
mushroom
They're
things.
like, and they go whoa, whoa, and they run around. They're very cute as well. It took me ages to find what was making the noise, and then I saw it just like running around. I was like, oh my god, it's a mushroom. It was very cool. And also, we should probably talk about Ratatoska as well, who was voiced by YouTube personality ProZD. I recommend looking him up, Matt, if you don't know who he is. He has done a lot of voice work, a lot of things in things like animes and stuff like that. He's a massive nerd, um, but very good voice work as well. And he did all the voices of the different aspects of Ratatoska's personality, which is very cool. Did you know that if you hit the chime enough times, it unlocks lots of interesting dialogue from Ratatoska, which is hilarious.
I watched
So,
a video of you just do it forever, and he just keeps
yeah,
on going. Oh, I will not react to this, and eventually
yes,
he just goes round in circles doing that.
yeah.
That's
And
hilarious.
eventually you do it enough times and he'll be like, stop with the chimes. You finally break him. It's very cool. Very funny.
His introduction, where he just jumps on Kratos and is just climbing all over him,
Yeah.
and Kratos just goes, "What
Yeah.
is
What
happening?"
is this? What is this on me? I loved another thing in the journal. Instead of Atreus writing in the journal, Kratos now writes in the journal, and you can read all his thoughts on everyone you
Mm.
meet through the whole journey. My most favourite entry was his entry on Mimir, where it has a sentence at the very end where it's like, he is compact and does not consume resources,
Yeah.
which just it made me laugh so much. It was great. I was like, you could just hear his voice in your head as you read it.
No, I love that we
Yeah.
get to read read in a different voice, read how Kratos thinks about the world
Mm,
and how
yeah.
much more open he is, and that
And
he
how intelligent he was as well. Like how he considers different situations and things. Yeah, I didn't really pick up on that as much before, which was very cool.
yeah. So the word laconic comes from Sparta.
Mm,
That that goes to show it doesn't mean you're stupid just because he doesn't talk very much.
mm,
And I really like looking back at like playing the original games and sort of retroactively putting that depth on him to
mhm,
see, oh, he didn't just enjoy war, he learnt stuff as well. And uh, one thing Kratos said about, Kratos talking to Mimir, and I think Mimir said, I can't remember what the word was, but basically Kratos said, in Sparta we were taught discipline.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Mimir says, "Is that what you want Atreus to learn?" And he goes, "No, I don't want him to have to."
Mm. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Hmm.
And the director of the game, Matt Sophos, he not only smashed it out of the park in terms of the game. The only two times I've seen like what he's said in interviews about it are two of the most perfectly profound statements about it. One was about Christopher Judge saying he gave every part of himself,
Mm.
which is exactly couldn't be put better.
Yeah.
But the best one was it's a story about a father trying to figure out what kind of father his son needs.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I think that should be the raison d'etre of every parent to think, what does my child need? And because that step gets them, Kratos has to step out of his comfort zone, not doing what makes himself feel safe, not doing everything to, he thinks, I just need to keep Atreus safe.
Mm.
He says, what does my son need?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
It is.
Um, Other ones. We'll talk about World Serpent in another episode because I've got some
Yes.
theories about that.
Yes.
I think, oh yes, the two most, the ones that were so unique and left a lasting impact were I think they're called half goofers,
Oh, yes.
those
Yeah.
massive
Sky jellyfish.
sandstorm jellyfish.
Amazing.
That's one of those things where,
Yeah.
remember I said about most games have like, oh, we had this great idea but we didn't have time to do it.
Mm.
That's one of those ideas. We want these
Definitely.
massive flying jellyfishes.
Yeah. Did you, when you saw that part where it flies up into the sky, where you're like, oh my God, it's the trailer? Because it was in one of the trailers.
Uh,
And
I only
of
I
course, it's
only
the,
I only watched when they released all the images of the
yes.
characters. That was I went completely
Ah,
dark
yes.
after that, so I
Yes.
didn't know anything about it. And so that's one of those things where complete surprise, where you go,
Mm.
whose idea was this,
Yeah. Yeah.
and how did they do it?
But no, it's cool because it makes you think, oh, that's going to be part of the main quest if it's in the trailer. It's definitely not in the main quest. It's a side quest. So I just thought that was very cool as well.
Yeah, and they just mold together and go
Yeah.
billions of little baby
And
ones.
tiny babies, they fly around. Yes, it's very cute as well. And then there was that really awkward part where Atreus was like talking about them mating and stuff, and he was like trying to phrase it in a certain way. And it was all just like, oh, how is this conversation going to go? We're having that talk. But yeah, it was very cool. There were all sorts of little moments like that in the side quests where um, they were just having normal like conversations that you would have with your parent or whatever else. It was very much. It didn't feel sort of stilted or it felt natural. It all felt like all the conversations during all the quests were very natural between the characters, which is one of the things I really liked. Mm.
Absolutely, it felt like everything. Just they're boring relationships.
Yeah.
They exist, but they've created such rich relationships that
Mm.
once you've created a relationship like that, I imagine writing is far easier.
Yeah.
You go, oh, that's what they say if this happened. Last second penultimate one was just
Mm.
remembered.
Yeah.
Ratatoskas, the four like the stags from the World Tree
Yeah. They were
escape.
very cool. Yeah. They were like different seasons, weren't they? And then you got to hear every time you go to the journal, there's a little entry where I think it was Kratos explains when Faye
Mm,
told him the story of each one before she died, which I thought was lovely as well, because it was like touching back on past memories.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But the crowning one of all of it, the lungbacker,
Mm,
the whale
yes,
that
yes.
Mimir
Chained
imprisoned.
and then freed. Yes,
That
that
was
was
one of the.
amazing. That was amazing. It was one of the very early quests in I can never pronounce it. Svartalfheim. Um, you could do it. I guess you could leave it to later, but I did it as early as I could do it because you were given the option just after you've done your first part in Svartalfheim. Um, and like you just uncover so much more about Mimir's past, which is very cool as well. I think we delve a lot more into things we didn't know so much about a lot of the characters in this game and really flesh out their stories and aspects of their lives that we didn't know about before, which is very cool. And seeing how Mimir wants to right his wrongs as well, which I think is influenced in a large part by Kratos wanting to right his own wrongs. Um, and I guess them both inspiring each other to be better, which is very cool.
Yeah, yeah. I played it. Yeah, it's one of the first ones. It just takes you by surprise when it goes bong. You get the
Yeah,
Atreus to shoot the drum, and this fucking whale appears out of
yeah,
nowhere,
it's huge.
and you go, and then you see the chains on its wings and on
Mm,
its fins, and it looks so painful
so sad.
like that. And yeah, you're right, because in the first game, Mimir's just this jolly, happy
Yeah,
head, and this one, he was really, he felt terrible about it. And I thought, after I'd finished it, I thought, oh, I wish I'd gone through that with Freya to see what
mm,
she says.
mm.
And she's a lot
Yeah,
more um, trying to help Mimir,
yeah,
because Kratos is really angry
yeah.
and traumatized, because that's
So
how he was for
interesting.
years. He was
Yeah.
literally, the blades of chaos were seared onto his skin.
Mm,
And Freya says, yeah, don't you think that being chained to a tree for hundreds of years counts as some penance? She's trying to help him. And
mm.
then they crown off perfectly. Atreus says, so Kratos says, there is no fixing some things, just better than they were,
Yeah,
which is very wise. And then Atreus says, it likes the wind. It likes feeling the wind on its face.
yeah.
And then Freya says the same thing as well, and you just go, "Yep, that's just ah,
Mm, it's brilliant. When I think about those two um, that you've mentioned, the Hafgufers and the Lindenbacker, basically those quests represent us as the player trying to undo the enslavement and the impact that Odin has had on these two different realms and how he kind of has plunged them into like servitude and war and the impact that it's had on these creatures who are essentially blameless and innocent and how we're trying to right that wrong as well as the player, which is just showing how it's kind of on all across all levels really the impact that Odin is having and that we're having in righting those wrongs, which is very cool.
yeah." And again, the back to the fact that Odin transforms people, warps them, twists them into terrible versions of themselves, because that's what he did with Mimir. It's
Mm,
what he did with Thor. It's what he did with Thor's sons, and what he did mostly with Freya. She sacrificed everything to marry him, and he was able to twist her and trap her.
yeah,
Are there any other animal thoughts that you don't think we've covered?
I'll probably remember one halfway through the next episode, but none that I can think of right now. No.
Cool. Right, in that case, we'll just bring it to a close. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching or listening, and we will see you next time. Bye bye.
Bye.